The first-class line at LAX buzzed with wealth, but Ethan Cole, 45, stood out, worn jacket, scarf, and boots screaming outsider. Nathan Blake, a smug tycoon, sneered, "You don't belong here, scarf guy." His voice dripping with scorn, loud enough to turn heads. Ethan's calm smile hid a secret as he fired back. "Ever think you're wrong about me?" The crowd froze, sensing a showdown. Why was Ethan so unshaken? What truth was he hiding beneath that rugged exterior? The jetway loomed, promising a clash that would shake the skies. Dive into this electrifying tale of pride and redemption. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-pounding stories that challenge bias and spark change. Hit the bell. Don't miss the next twist. The Los Angeles airport thrummed with restless energy. A chaotic ballet of clattering suitcases, barked announcements, and hurried footsteps. Amid the swirl of travelers, the first-class line at Gate 47 was an oasis of privilege. Its passengers cloaked in designer labels and quiet arrogance. Ethan Cole, 45, stood out like a flaw in a polished gem. His worn leather jacket, patched at the elbows, hung loose over a faded black tee, paired with jeans frayed at the hems and scuffed boots that had seen better days. His dark, tousled hair spilled over scratched sunglasses perched on his nose. A faded scarf draped carelessly around his neck. In his pocket, a tarnished pocket watch, his late mother's, engraved with kindness first, ticked softly, a silent vow grounding the reclusive actor. Ethan, a Hollywood titan known for blockbuster roles, was incognito, his calm presence a stark contrast to the frenetic crowd, but his simplicity drew eyes, and one pair burned with unveiled contempt. Nathan Blake, 38, loomed behind him, his tailored navy suit and gleaming Patek Philippe watch screaming success, a real estate mogul fresh off a multi-million-dollar deal. Nathan's every gesture was a performance, his cologne a bold declaration. His gray eyes raked over Ethan, and a sneer twisted his lips. "First class, really?" he said, his voice loud, cutting through the airport din. "They letting just anyone in now?" Ethan turned, his expression serene, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Guess the rules changed," he said, his voice low, steady, like a river over stones. "Surprises happen." Nathan's brow arched, his sneer deepening. "Surprises, sure," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But you look more like you missed the bus to Coach. No offense, man." Ethan adjusted his scarf, his sunglasses catching the fluorescent glare. "None taken," he said, his grin sharpening. "You seem pretty sure of your read, though. Care to share?" The line shuffled forward, but Nathan leaned closer, his voice a theatrical whisper. "Come on, pal," he said, chuckling coldly. "Scarf? Beat-up jacket? You're not fooling anyone. First class is for players, not whatever you are." Passengers nearby turned, sensing a spark of drama. Mia, 25, a sharp-eyed flight attendant scanning tickets, caught Ethan's gaze and froze, her lips parting in recognition. She'd seen his films, knew that face, but bit her tongue, her eyes flicking to Nathan with subtle disdain. Clara, an older woman in a floral shawl, sat nearby, her frown deepening as she clutched her boarding pass, muttering, "Some people have no manners." Ethan's smile held, his voice soft but pointed. "Whatever I am, huh?" he said, slipping his hands into his pockets, the pocket watch a quiet weight. "Sounds like you've got me all figured out. What's my story then? Drifter? Failed poet?" Nathan's laugh was sharp, drawing more eyes. "Poet's generous," he said, his watch glinting as he gestured. "You look like you're one bad day from hitchhiking. First class isn't your scene, buddy." Mia stepped closer, her voice professional but warm. "Tickets, gentlemen," she said, her eyes lingering on Ethan. A silent nod of respect. Ethan handed over his ticket, his calm unshaken, while Nathan thrust his forward, his cufflinks flashing. "Scene, huh?" Ethan said, his tone teasing but firm, as they edged toward the gate. Funny how you think you own it. Ever consider you're not the only one with a story? Nathan's eyes narrowed, his voice rising. Oh, I've got a story, he said, his sneer returning. Built an empire from nothing. You're just taking up space where you don't belong. Clara, now standing, cleared her throat loudly, her voice sharp. Young man, maybe mind your own business, she said, glaring at Nathan. Not everyone needs to flaunt their wallet to belong. Nathan flinched, his cheeks reddening, but he doubled down, his voice a hiss. Stay out of this, lady. This guy's a fraud, and I'm calling it like I see it. Ethan's grin faded, his voice low, cutting. Fraud, huh? That's a bold bet. You sure you want to play that card before you know the game? The line slowed, the jetway looming. Mia's radio crackled, but her eyes stayed on Ethan, a silent plea for him to keep the peace. A businessman in a pinstripe suit whispered to his companion, "This is getting good." His phone half raised, ready to capture the clash. Nathan leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. Game? There's no game here. You're out of your league, scarf guy. Why don't you save us all some time and head to economy? Ethan's eyes locked with Nathan's, his voice steady, a quiet storm brewing. League, huh? Tell you what, let's see how this flight goes. Might surprise you who's in whose league. Mia intervened, her voice firm. Gentlemen, please. We're boarding now, she said, gesturing to the jetway. Let's keep it civil. Nathan scoffed, brushing past Ethan, his voice sharp. Civil? With this wannabe? Good luck. Ethan followed, his scarf swaying, his calm a stark contrast to Nathan's bluster. Looking forward to it, he said, his tone teasing but laced with steel. As they stepped into the jetway, the boarding call echoed, but the real drama was just taking flight. A collision of ego and humility set to ignite at 30,000 feet. Nathan thought he held the upper hand, but Ethan's quiet strength, and a secret ticking in his pocket, promised a reckoning that would shake the cabin to its core. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 was a cocoon of luxury, its plush leather seats and soft lighting a stark contrast to the chaos of LAX. Ethan Cole, 45, settled into his window seat, his worn leather jacket slung over the armrest, his faded scarf draped loosely across his lap. His tousled hair brushed the collar of his black tee, and his scratched sunglasses rested on the tray table beside his mother's pocket watch, its faint ticking a quiet rhythm in the hushed cabin. Ethan, a Hollywood icon cloaked in anonymity, gazed out at the tarmac, his serene demeanor unshaken by the earlier clash at the gate. But the tension followed him aboard, seated just across the aisle in the form of Nathan Blake. Nathan, 38, adjusted his tailored suit, his cufflinks glinting as he stowed his briefcase. His sharp gray eyes flicked to Ethan, a smirk curling his lips, the sting of their airport exchange still fresh. The cabin was half full, with passengers settling in, their murmurs blending with the hum of the engines. Mia, the young flight attendant, moved through the aisle, her professional smile masking a quiet admiration for Ethan, whose face she'd recognized instantly. Clara, the older woman from the gate, sat a row ahead, her floral shawl draped over her shoulders, her occasional glance at Nathan laced with disapproval. Nathan leaned across the aisle, his voice low but pointed. "Nice view from up here, huh?" he said, gesturing to the window. "Bet it's a rare treat for you, scarf guy." Ethan turned, his expression calm, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's a view," he said, his voice steady, like a breeze over still water. "But I'm more into the journey than the scenery." Nathan's smirk faltered, his tone sharpening. "Journey, right?" he said, adjusting his watch. "You strike me as more of a backroads type. How'd you even swing a seat like this? Win a raffle?" A few passengers glanced over, sensing the undercurrent. Mia, pouring coffee for a businessman, caught Ethan's eye, her subtle nod urging restraint. Ethan leaned back, his fingers brushing the pocket watch. "Let's just say I've had a few good days," he said, his tone light but edged. "You seem awfully curious." Though, what's my ticket gotta do with you? Nathan chuckled, his voice dripping with condescension. Just making conversation, he said, crossing his arms. Guys like you in first class, it's like seeing a fish ride a bicycle. Gotta wonder how you pulled it off. Clara turned in her seat, her voice sharp. Maybe he earned it, same as you, she said, her eyes narrowing at Nathan. Not everyone needs to flash their cash to prove a point. Nathan's jaw tightened, his cheeks reddening. Mind your own, ma'am, he snapped, then turned back to Ethan, his voice lower. She's got no idea, but I do. You're out of place, pal. Stick to your lane. Ethan's smile didn't waver, his voice soft but piercing. My lane, he said, leaning forward slightly. Sounds like you're the one drawing lines. Ever think you're boxing yourself in, too? The cabin grew quieter, the weight of Ethan's words settling. A young woman in a silk blouse, seated behind, whispered to her companion, "This guy's got some nerve." Her tone a mix of amusement and respect for Ethan's calm. Mia approached, her voice professional but firm. "Can I get you gentlemen anything?" she asked, her eyes lingering on Ethan, a silent plea for peace. "Whiskey, neat?" Nathan said, his tone curt, his eyes never leaving Ethan. "Something to match the altitude." Ethan met Miashgesh, his voice warm. "Just tea, thanks," he said, then turned to Nathan. "You're really hung up on appearances, aren't you? What's got you so convinced I don't belong?" Nathan's smirk returned, his voice a hiss. "Experience," he said, leaning closer. "I've built a fortune reading people. You're a poser scarf guy. Probably maxed out a credit card for this seat." Ethan chuckled, the sound low and genuine, drawing a few curious glances. "Reading people, huh?" he said, his eyes twinkling. "Might want to get your eyes checked. You're missing the fine print." Mia returned, setting Nathan's whiskey and Ethan's tea on their trays. "Enjoy?" she said, her tone neutral, but her glance at Ethan held a flicker of admiration. Clara, sipping her water, muttered, "Some folks need a mirror more than a drink." Her words aimed at Nathan. Nathan ignored her, swirling his whiskey, his voice sharp. "Fine print my ass," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You talk a big game, but I've seen guys like you chasing dreams, crashing hard. This seat's a fluke, and you know it." Ethan sipped his tea, his voice steady, a quiet storm brewing. "You're so sure you've got me pegged," he said, setting the cup down. "But what if you're wrong? What if the guy in the scarf's got more going on than you'll ever guess?" Nathan's laugh was harsh, drawing more eyes. "More going on?" he said, his voice rising. "Like what? A secret trust fund? A winning lottery ticket? Save it, pal." Ethan leaned back, his scarf shifting, his tone calm but pointed. "Keep guessing," he said, his eyes locking with Nathan's. "You're in for a hell of a surprise." The cabin lights dimmed as the plane taxied, the engines roaring to life. Mia secured her cart, her eyes flicking to Ethan, sensing a storm gathering. Clara adjusted her shawl, her voice low. "Pride comes before a fall," she murmured, her gaze on Nathan. Nathan downed his whiskey, his smirk defiant, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. Ethan's calm was a wall he couldn't crack, and the cabin's growing attention only tightened the screws. The plane lifted off, soaring into the night, carrying a clash of ego and humility that was far from over. Nathan thought he held the reins, but Ethan's quiet strength, and the secret ticking in his pocket, promised a reckoning that would shake the skies. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 hummed with the steady drone of engines, its dimmed lights casting soft shadows over the plush seats. At 30,000 feet, the world below was a distant blur, but the tension inside was sharp and immediate. Ethan Cole, 45, sat by the window, his worn leather jacket folded beside him, his faded scarf draped across his lap, his tousled hair framed a face serene yet alert, his scratched sunglasses and mother's pocket watch, engraved with kindness first, resting on the tray table. Ethan, a Hollywood legend hiding in plain sight, sipped his tea, his calm a stark contrast to the storm brewing across the aisle. Nathan Blake, 38, lounged in his seat, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his empty whiskey glass glinting under the reading light. His gray eyes burned with a mix of defiance and unease, the sting of Ethan's unshakable composure eating at him. The cabin was quiet, save for the faint clink of glass and murmurs of other passengers. But Nathan's presence was a loud disruption. Mia, the young flight attendant, moved through the aisle, her professional smile masking a quiet allegiance to Ethan, whose identity she guarded like a secret. Clara, the older woman a row ahead, flipped through a magazine, her occasional glance at Nathan heavy with judgment. Nathan leaned across the aisle, his voice low, venomous. "You're a real philosopher, aren't you?" he said, his smirk forced. "All this talk about journeys and surprises. Bet you practice that in front of a mirror." Ethan set his teacup down, his expression tranquil, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "No mirror needed," he said, his voice steady, like a stone in a stream. "Just comes from living a bit. You should try it. Less posing, more listening." Nathan's jaw tightened, his voice rising. "Listening?" he said, his laugh sharp, drawing eyes. "To what? Your hippie wisdom? I've built a fortune while guys like you chase pipe dreams. Spare me the lecture." A few passengers stirred, their curiosity piqued. Mia, adjusting a tray nearby, shot Ethan a glance, her eyes urging restraint. Clara turned slightly, her voice cutting through the hum. "Some folks talk big to hide small hearts," she said, her gaze fixed on Nathan, her floral shawl slipping as she leaned forward. Nathan's cheeks reddened, his voice a hiss. "Nobody asked you, lady?" he snapped, then turned to Ethan, his tone biting. "You remind me of a guy I knew, always spouting ideals, ended up broke and begging. That's your future, scarf guy." Ethan leaned forward, his scarf shifting, his voice soft but piercing. "That guy's not me," he said, his eyes locking with Nathan's. "But you're carrying something heavy, aren't you? All this noise you're making, it's not about me. It's about you." The cabin grew still, Nathan's smirk faltering. A businessman in a pinstripe suit lowered his tablet, whispering to a seatmate, "This is better than in-flight movies." A young woman in a silk blouse leaned forward, her eyes wide, drawn to Ethan's quiet strength. Nathan's voice trembled, his bravado cracking. "You don't know a damn thing about me," he said, his fingers gripping the armrest. "I've got houses, cars, a life you can't touch. You're just a nobody trying to sound deep." Ethan's smile faded, his voice calm but weighted. "Nobody?" he said, his gaze unwavering. "You're so busy shouting what you've got, you're missing what you don't. Peace, purpose, that's worth more than your houses." Clara nodded, her voice low but firm. "He's got you there," she said, her magazine forgotten. "Money buys seats, not souls." Nathan's face flushed, his voice rising, a desperate edge creeping in. "Souls?" he scoffed, his laugh hollow. "You think you're some guru because you dress like a bum? I've earned my place. You're just leeching off someone else's dime." Mia approached, her voice professional but tense. "Gentlemen, please keep it down," she said, her eyes flicking to Ethan, a silent apology. "Can I get you anything else?" Nathan waved her off, his voice sharp. "I'm fine," he said, his eyes never leaving Ethan. "Just dealing with a wannabe prophet here." Ethan met Mia's gaze, his voice warm. "I'm good, thanks," he said, then turned to Nathan, his tone steady. "You're fighting a battle nobody else sees, man. Ever stop to ask why you need to prove so much?" Nathan's breath hitched, his voice a low growl. "Prove?" he said, leaning closer, his whiskey breath sharp. "I don't need to prove anything to a guy like you. You're nothing. Probably scammed your way into this seat." Ethan leaned back, his scarf a quiet defiance, his voice soft but cutting. "Nothing, huh?" he said, his eyes twinkling with a secret. "Keep swinging, Nathan. You're hitting air, but it's one hell of a show." The cabin buzzed, passengers now openly watching. The businessman chuckled, muttering, "This guy's got ice in his veins." The young woman in silk whispered, "He's schooling him," without raising his voice. Mia lingered nearby, her radio crackling, her eyes on Ethan, sensing the storm building. Clara adjusted her shawl, her voice a murmur. "Pride's a heavy load," she said, her gaze on Nathan, who seemed to shrink under the weight of his own words. Nathan's smirk returned, but it was brittle, his voice trembling with defiance. "Show's just starting, scarf guy," he said, his fingers drumming the armrest. "You'll crash and burn before we land." Ethan sipped his tea, his calm a fortress, his voice a quiet promise. "We'll see," he said, his eyes locking with Nathan's. "But I'm betting you'll learn something before this flight's over." The plane soared through the night, the cabin a pressure cooker of ego and truth. Nathan thought he was winning, but Ethan's words were slicing deeper, setting the stage for a reckoning that would shake the skies and leave one man forever changed. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 was a taut wire, vibrating with the unspoken stakes of a clash that had captivated every passenger. The dim glow of reading lights cast stark shadows, amplifying the tension that pulsed through the plush seats. Ethan Cole, 45, sat by the window, his faded scarf folded neatly on his lap, his worn leather jacket slung over the armrest. His tousled hair framed a face serene yet piercing, his mother's pocket watch, engraved with kindness first, ticking softly on the tray table beside his empty teacup. Ethan, a Hollywood titan cloaked in anonymity, held the cabin's attention with his unshakable calm, a quiet force against the storm across the aisle. Nathan Blake, 38, gripped his armrests, his tailored suit creased, his face flushed with a volatile mix of rage and desperation. His empty whiskey glass teetered on his tray, a relic of his fading bravado. The cabin was hushed, the drone of engines a low undercurrent to the drama unfolding. Mia, the young flight attendant, lingered at the galley's edge, her professional poise strained, her eyes flicking to Ethan with silent support. Clara, the older woman a row ahead, sat rigid, her floral shawl clutched tightly, her gaze boring into Nathan with righteous indignation. The other passengers, businessmen, a young couple, a woman in silk, watched openly now, their whispers a soft chorus of anticipation. Nathan's voice cracked, his composure splintering as he leaned toward Ethan, his words a snarl. "You think you can sit there, all high and mighty, judging me?" he said, his volume spiking, drawing gasps. "I've clawed my way to the top while guys like you scrape by. You're a fake, scarf guy, and everyone here knows it." Ethan met his gaze, his expression tranquil, a faint sadness in his eyes. "I'm not judging you, Nathan," he said, his voice low, steady, like a lighthouse in a gale. "But you're shouting loud enough for both of us. What's got you so scared you need to tear me down to feel big?" Nathan's face twisted, his voice a shout, shattering the cabin's hush. "Scared?" he roared, slamming his fist on the tray, sending his glass crashing to the floor. "You're nothing, a nobody in a cheap jacket preaching like you've got answers. I've got millions, a legacy. You've got nothing but words." The cabin erupted in murmurs, passengers shifting, some leaning forward, others recoiling. Clara spun in her seat, her voice sharp as a blade. "Enough," she snapped, her shawl slipping. "You're embarrassing yourself, young man. Sit down before you make this worse." Nathan ignored her, his eyes wild, locked on Ethan. "You're a fraud," he bellowed, standing now, his suit jacket flapping. "You don't belong here, and I'm done pretending you do." Mia rushed forward, her voice firm but trembling. "Sir, please take your seat," she said, her hands raised, her eyes darting to Ethan for guidance. "You're disturbing everyone." Ethan remained seated, his calm a stark contrast to Nathan's fury. "Sit down, Nathan," he said, his voice soft but commanding, cutting through the chaos. "You're not fighting me, you're fighting yourself, and you're losing." Nathan's breath heaved, his fists clenched, his voice a desperate growl. "Losing? To you?" He spat, leaning over the aisle, his face inches from Ethan's. "You're a joke. A wannabe who lucked into the seat. I've earned everything, everything. And you'll never touch what I've built." A businessman in a pinstripe suit muttered, "This guy's unhinged. His tablet forgotten." The young couple behind whispered, "He's digging his own grave," their eyes wide with awe at Ethan's restraint. The woman in silk clutched her purse, her voice low. "He's got no idea who he's yelling at." Ethan leaned forward, his scarf shifting, his voice a quiet thunder. "Earned it, sure," he said, his eyes piercing Nathan's. "But what's it worth if you're so empty you need to scream it? You're not angry at me, Nathan. You're angry at what you see in the mirror." Nathan froze, his face a mask of shock and shame, his voice choking. "You don't know me," he whispered, but the words lacked conviction, his body trembling as he sank back into his seat. The cabin was silent, the weight of Ethan's words a palpable force, stripping Nathan bare. Clara's voice broke the hush, her tone fierce. "You ought to listen to him," she said, her eyes blazing. "That man's got more wisdom in his little finger than you've got in all your fancy suits." Mia hovered, her radio crackling, her voice soft. "Is everything okay now?" she asked, her eyes on Ethan. A silent thank you for defusing the storm. Ethan nodded, his voice warm. "We're good, Mia," he said, then turned to Nathan, his tone gentle but firm. "You've got a choice, Nathan. Keep swinging at shadows, or figure out what's really eating you. That's up to you." Nathan stared at his hands, his bravado gone, his voice a mumble. "You don't get it," he said, his eyes glistening, the fight drained from him. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild." Ethan's gaze softened, his voice a lifeline. "Maybe I don't," he said, "but I know carrying that weight alone makes it heavier. You don't have to prove anything to me or anyone here." The cabin held its breath, passengers exchanging glances, some nodding, others whispering in approval. The businessman muttered, "Damn, that's deep," while the young couple clasped hands, moved by Ethan's compassion. The woman in silk wiped her eyes, her voice a whisper. "He's more than he seems." Mia stepped back, her smile subtle, sensing the tide had turned. Clara adjusted her shawl, her voice low. "Some lessons hurt the most," she murmured, her gaze on Nathan, who sat hunched, a man unmoored. The plane soared through the night, the cabin a crucible of truth and reckoning. Nathan's outburst had bared his soul, but Ethan's words had cut deeper, exposing the fragility beneath his pride. The stage was set for a revelation that would shatter Nathan's world and leave the cabin forever changed. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 was a silent battlefield, the air thick with the aftermath of Nathan Blake's explosive outburst. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the plush seats, amplifying the weight of the moment. Ethan Cole, 45, sat by the window, his faded scarf neatly folded on his tray table, his worn leather jacket draped over the armrest. His tousled hair framed a face serene yet resolute. His mother's pocket watch, engraved with kindness first, a quiet sentinel beside his empty teacup. Ethan, a Hollywood icon veiled in anonymity, held the cabin's focus, his calm a beacon in the storm that had just subsided. Across the aisle, Nathan Blake slumped in his seat, his tailored suit creased, his face pale, the fire of his earlier rage extinguished, replaced by a raw, exposed vulnerability. The cabin was hushed, the hum of engines a faint undertone to the lingering tension. Mia, the young flight attendant, stood at the galley's edge, her professional poise softened by a quiet awe for Ethan's restraint. Clara, the older woman a row ahead, clutched her floral shawl, her eyes flicking between Nathan's defeated posture and Ethan's steady gaze, a mix of pity and approval in her expression. Other passengers, the businessman in pinstripes, the young couple, the woman in silk, watched in rapt silence, their earlier whispers replaced by a collective anticipation. As if sensing the story was far from over, Mia approached, her voice gentle but clear, breaking the silence. "Mr. Cole," she said, her eyes meeting Ethan's with a flicker of recognition she could no longer hide. "The captain asked me to confirm your Tokyo connection. He also sends his regards. Big fan of your work." The name Cole detonated like a quiet bomb. Passengers gasped, heads snapping toward Ethan. Nathan's eyes widened, his breath catching as he muttered, "Ethan Cole." His voice was barely audible, a mix of disbelief and dawning horror. The businessman dropped his tablet, whispering, "No way." The actor, the young couple exchanged stunned glances, the woman in silk covering her mouth, her eyes glistening with realization. Ethan gave Mia a small, grateful nod, his voice warm. "Thanks, Mia," he said, then turned to Nathan, his expression unchanged, as if the revelation were incidental. "Guess the cat's out of the bag." Nathan's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he gripped his armrests. "You're Ethan Cole?" he stammered, his voice cracking. "The Ethan Cole? I didn't know." Ethan leaned back, his scarf shifting, his voice steady but firm. "Didn't think it mattered," he said, his eyes locking with Nathan's. "My name doesn't change what you said, Nathan, or what it says about you." The cabin buzzed, passengers leaning forward, their murmurs a soft roar. Clara turned fully, her voice sharp but kind. "You owe that man an apology," she said, her shawl slipping as she pointed at Nathan. "Fancy suit or not, you've got no right to treat anyone like that." Nathan's gaze dropped, his voice a choked whisper. I thought you were just..." He trailed off, his hands clenching, unable to finish. The weight of his earlier words, his taunts, his rage, crashed over him, each one a stone in a growing pile of regret. Mia stepped back, her eyes on Ethan, a silent apology for her slip. The businessman muttered, "He's been yelling at a damn legend," his tone a mix of shock and amusement. The young couple whispered, "He's so calm, even now," their admiration palpable. The woman in silk dabbed her eyes, her voice low. "He didn't need to say who he was. That's real class." Ethan's gaze softened, his voice gentle but piercing. "You didn't need to know my name to treat me like a person," he said, leaning forward slightly. "That's the point, Nathan. You chose to tear me down because I didn't look like your idea of first class. What's that say about the world you're building?" Nathan's head bowed, his voice barely audible. I was wrong," he said, his eyes glistening, his bravado shattered. I didn't know who you were." Ethan's expression held no judgment, only a quiet resolve. "It's not about who I am," he said, his voice a lifeline. "It's about who you choose to be. You've got a chance to figure that out right now." Clara nodded, her voice softer now. "Listen to him, son," she said, her shawl settling as she leaned back. "You've got a heart in there somewhere. Find it." The cabin was electric, passengers hanging on every word. The businessman raised his glass, muttering, "Here's to learning the hard way." The young couple clasped hands, the woman whispering, "He's changing him, right in front of us." The woman in silk smiled, her voice a murmur. "That's what real strength looks like." Mia approached again, her voice professional but warm. "We'll be serving dinner soon," she said, her eyes flicking to Nathan, a subtle warning to keep the peace. "Anything you need, Mr. Cole?" Ethan shook his head, his voice kind. "I'm good, Mia. Just keep doing what you do," he said, his smile easing the tension. Nathan sat silent, his hands folded, his gaze fixed on the floor. The revelation of Ethan's identity had stripped him bare, his earlier arrogance now a hollow echo. The cabin watched, breathless, as the man who'd roared with pride faced the mirror Ethan held up, a mirror reflecting not just his mistakes, but a path to redemption. The plane soared through the night, the cabin a crucible of truth and transformation. Ethan's identity was no longer a secret, but the real revelation was the power of his words. cutting through Nathan's defenses and laying bare the cost of his pride. The stage was set for a final lesson, one that would leave Nathan and the cabin forever changed. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, the plane slicing through clouds as it neared Tokyo. The tension that had gripped the space hours ago had settled into a reflective calm. The plush seats and muted hum of engines now a backdrop to a profound shift. Ethan Cole, 45, sat by the window, his worn leather jacket folded beside him, his faded scarf draped over the armrest. His tousled hair caught the light, and his mother's pocket watch, engraved with kindness first, rested on the tray table, its steady ticking a quiet heartbeat. Ethan, a Hollywood legend unmasked, gazed out at the horizon, his serene presence a testament to the power of humility. Across the aisle, Nathan Blake sat hunched, his tailored suit creased, his face etched with a mix of shame and introspection, the weight of his earlier outburst and Ethan's words pressing heavy. The cabin was quiet, passengers stirring as breakfast trays were cleared. Mia, the young flight attendant, moved through the aisle with practiced grace, her smile warm as she glanced at Ethan, gratitude in her eyes for how he'd handled the storm. Clara, the older woman a row ahead, sipped her coffee, her floral shawl neat. Her occasional glance at Nathan softened with hope. The businessman in pinstripes, the young couple, and the woman in silk resumed their routines, but their eyes lingered on Ethan and Nathan, the drama's echo still resonant. Nathan cleared his throat, his voice low, hesitant. "I need to say something," he said, his hands clasped, his gaze fixed on the tray table. He looked at Ethan, his eyes raw. "I was out of line, way out. I treated you like garbage, and I'm sorry. Not because of who you are, but because I was wrong." Ethan turned, his expression kind, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Takes courage to say that," he said, his voice steady, like a hand extended. "Apologies are a start, Nathan. What you do next, that's what counts." Clara nodded, her voice gentle. "He's right," she said, setting her cup down. "You've got a chance to be better. Don't waste it on pride." Nathan's shoulders slumped, his voice a whisper. "I've spent years building walls," he said, his fingers tracing the edge of his watch. "After my divorce, I thought success would fill the hole. But you made me see it's still there." Ethan leaned forward, his scarf shifting, his voice warm but firm. "Success doesn't fill holes," he said, his eyes meeting Nathan's. "Kindness does. Connection does. My mom used to say, you're only as rich as the good you leave behind. That's what lasts." Mia paused nearby, her tray of juice glasses steady, her voice soft. "Well said, Mr. Cole," she said, her smile genuine. "You've given us all something to think about." The businessman raised his glass, his voice low. "To second chances," he muttered, nodding at Nathan. The young couple smiled, the woman whispering, "He's like a teacher up here." The woman in silk adjusted her scarf, her voice a murmur. "That's what makes him different." Nathan's eyes glistened, his voice cracking. "How do you do it?" he asked, leaning closer. "Stay so grounded with all you've got. I'd be shouting it from the rooftops." Ethan chuckled, his fingers brushing the pocket watch. "Took me years to learn," he said, his tone reflective. "Fame, money, it's noise. What keeps you grounded is knowing who you are when nobody's watching. That's where the real work is." Clara's eyes sparkled, her voice firm. "Amen to that," she said, her shawl slipping as she nodded. "You've got a gift, Mr. Cole, and it's not just on the screen." As the plane began its descent, a young boy, no older than 6, approached Ethan, clutching a crumpled napkin. "Can you sign this?" he asked, his eyes wide. "My mom says you're a hero." Ethan's grin widened, his voice soft. "Hero? Huh?" he said, taking the napkin and signing it with a flourish. "Tell your mom the real heroes are the ones who help others, like you're gonna do someday." The boy beamed, scampering back to his seat, and the cabin erupted in soft applause. Passengers moved by Ethan's warmth, Nathan watched, his expression shifting, a spark of resolve igniting. After landing, the cabin emptied, but Nathan lingered, his voice quiet as he faced Ethan. "I'm gonna try," he said, his hands steady. "Be better like you said. Thanks for not giving up on me." Ethan clapped his shoulder, his voice kind. "You're not alone, Nathan," he said. "Start small, one kind act at a time." As Ethan stepped into the Tokyo terminal, fans approached, their voices hushed, respectful. He greeted each with a smile, patient and genuine, his scarf swaying like a flag of humility. Nathan watched from a distance, his suitcase in hand, his gaze distant but hopeful. He pulled out his phone, hesitating, then dialed a number he hadn't called in years, his ex-wife's, his voice trembling as he left a message. "I'm sorry," he began. A first step toward change. The terminal buzzed, but Ethan's quiet strength lingered. A lesson etched in every passenger who'd witnessed the flight. True worth wasn't in seats or suits, but in the kindness you carried, the lives you touched. Nathan's journey was just beginning, but Ethan's words, rooted in a mother's wisdom, had planted a seed, proving that even in the skies, a single act of humility could ground a heart adrift. The story of Ethan Cole and Nathan Blake is a profound lesson in humility, respect, and the courage to change. Ethan, disguised in a worn jacket and scarf, faced Nathan's arrogant judgment in a first-class cabin, exposing the folly of valuing people by appearances. Ethan's calm, rooted in his mother's mantra of kindness first, revealed that true worth lies not in wealth or status, but in how we treat others. Nathan's journey, from prideful outbursts to a humbled apology, shows that even the most entrenched biases can shift when confronted with truth and compassion. Ethan's wisdom, shared through quiet strength, teaches us to look beyond surface impressions and seek the humanity in everyone. Clara's support and Mia's subtle allegiance highlight the power of community in challenging prejudice. This tale urges us to reflect on our own judgments, embrace kindness, and recognize that real success is measured by the positive impact we leave on others. It's a call to build a world where respect transcends status, starting with ourselves. Did Ethan's story inspire you? Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that ignite reflection and hope. Hit the bell to catch the next unforgettable story.